welcome to Comic Books and You with Etienne. Today we're going to talk about Volume 7 of Thorgal, L'Enfant des Etoiles, The Child of the Stars. And we're going to look at the first of the three stories in this particular volume, The Lost Drakkar. This particular volume is three separate stories on the youth of the character. This predates any of the books in the Young Thorgal series that exist. It is basically an introduction to the character origin story, and we see a wide variety of things from it, ranging from fairly realistic for the first story to high fantasy for the second story and sci-fi for the third story. So it is a very interesting book overall. We are going to go through it one story at a time. So we're starting with the first one, Le Drakkar Perdu. Unlike most of the other Thorgal stories, Thorgal is not the main character or even an important character in this particular story. The, I would say, protagonist in this case is Leif Haraldson, which is the king of the Northern Vikings at the time. In this story, he is leading an expedition to find new lands and new places for the Vikings to settle and conquer, if necessary. He is shown as an honorable man, and he doesn't believe in ancient superstitions. So he is the man who will be raising Thorgal. Our second character is a recurring one, Gandalf le Fou, who in this case we see as a much younger version of the man we saw in the previous volume in the previous story. He's still depicted as a scheming and treacherous man, and he is very happy to use superstition and rituals in order to achieve his own goals. It puts him at complete odds with life. Physically, he looks much more menacing, much more powerful than in the first story. He actually looks fit and capable. So we see a very different version of this character. We're going to go over the story as usual. It's going to be fairly short, as this is a 12-page story overall. The Northern Vikings, led by Leif Haraldson, decide to go exploring. They leave in spring, as we see in this particular image. But the trip turns sour due to tempest, horrible sea conditions. They started out with 150 men and are down to a single boat. Gandalf le Fou blames the king for how bad things are turning out, and the other Vikings start mutinying. The priest sorcerer declares that they're doomed, but there's still a way to survive. He's asking for a human sacrifice of a great warrior, Thorgal, who is misidentified as a god in this book. And that's the thing that's been going on throughout the Thorgal series. Aegir is considered to be a Jotun if you read Norse mythology. As with all natural things, fire giants, ice giants, mountain giants, natural things are represented by the giants, while the gods represent ideas and ideals. Does it really matter in this story? Not really. Some people might get irritated by it if they're into mythology quite a bit. Gandalf nominates Leif as the sacrifice, mainly so he can take over the tribe. Leif does reply that even if he does that, all he's going to get is a handful of men on a doomed boat. Leif does say that he should be allowed to die with a weapon in his hand, as any Viking warrior. The other Vikings on the boat do agree, because if he was killed as a weak man or something like that, he would not ascend to Valhalla. Gandalf does grant him a sword, but Leif is tied to the mast of the boat, so it would have been an easy death anyways. They begin the ritual, but at that point, a light appears in the distance, and everybody on the boat says that it's a sign that Aegir doesn't want a sacrifice, and that they should follow that light. The king regains control of his ship, grabs his crew, steers the ship towards the light, and the light ends by dragging them back to Northland, where they came from. As they go there, the tempest subsides, and they come out in a nice summer day. They land, and they find the origin of the light, some sort of pod, and when they open it, they find a small, well, a baby at this point. Now, I was going to say a small child, but it's really a baby. and Leif names the child Thorgal Haraldson in honor of Thor and Eir. Pretty straightforward story once again, and gives you the origin story of the character. Once again, we got that weird sci-fi element of an escape pod or a life raft, which we've already seen a few times through the discussions we've had here. The cover for this particular volume, we're going to see it two other times actually. Fairly straightforward and basic. We see the gods in the back and the magical creatures that'll show up through the different stories, including some of the sci-fi elements. We've got a spaceship here on the side, and we've got Thorgal's grandfather in the back here, which is another supernatural sci-fi element. But we have Nidog, the snake, a dwarf, the goddess Frigg. So we've got also those supernatural elements which come in the second story. There is no specific cover for that story for Le Drakkar Perdu. This is common in Franco-Belgian comics, that they have one main cover for the book and no inner covers for the different sections of it. But it would have been nice to have something. Artistic merits. The art in this, we see a drastic improvement from the first book. There's been a very good curve between the different Thorgal book. And as this is the seventh book, the art is now refined and at the point where it should. The introduction here with the Viking departure, setting and time appropriate for the, let's say, early 10th century to late 10th century. The Drakkar looks really good. The background is amazing. The colors are very vibrant on that particular image, as an example. Very different compared to the muted colors we get for the rest of the story. They are in a tempest. They are at night, so we only have grayscales for a lot of things except the character's skin. Even the air color, we can't tell who's got red hair, blonde hair, white hair in the case of Leif. The sea is constantly well drawn, and we constantly have the crashing of the wave and the churning of the water around the boat. Here we have two examples of just an image of the boat, and it is remarkable. This is almost the kind of things you would see on full-blown paintings. You'd have examples of that in Japanese paintings, actually, for boats in the storm. One thing I do not like, and yes, I'm reusing the image, but it is a very good image to give us an idea here. A lot of the characters look the same or look very close. The muted palette causes that. They don't have clear clothing color, clear air color. We know who is who by how they're speaking and how they're acting, but we can't tell easily by looking at them. But even there in the background, you can see the churning and the blowing of the water, which is extremely powerful here. As far as story elements goes, we're going to include both story elements and themes here because they meld together fairly well. We have a dichotomy here between the good king and the bad king. Leif is viewed as a good king. He is leading his people. Even in hopeless situation, he tries to keep the best of it and tries to maintain morale. Gandalf, we've seen him before as the decadent king. Here we see him as a treacherous man who wants to steal the kingdom, even though there wouldn't be much to steal at that point, let's face it. It's an interesting dichotomy between the two characters. Religion plays an important point in this story. Leif, a bit more forward thinking. You've got the backward thinking sorcerer priest who's taken advantage of by Gandalf. We also see, I haven't pointed it out before, but as they get to the escape pod, the sorcerer priest says that it's the voice of a god coming from it, while Leif clearly identifies it as the cries of a hungry child. We have a good king who is forward thinking, who doesn't partake into the excess of religion, but still respects religion, as we see he names Thorgal out of the religious elements. Again, we see a child from the stars. It's a theme and a trope I actually enjoy. I've said it before and I'll say it again every time we look at it. And every time it shows up, I like that trope. You'll have the people saying that it's a bit of a Moses allegory. In the case of Thorgal, really not. We have those sci-fi elements being included in a 1984 French comic, and I do think it makes sense because we are at a point in time where Star Wars with Return of the Jedi is still very big. We've got E-Man coming out, which is in the same sword and sorcery line with sci-fi elements. So including sci-fi elements in a fantasy story is standard at this point and fits really well. Final thoughts on this particular story. Nice origin story for the character. It gives you a good look at the Vikings, how they live, how they acted. All the other stories in the volume turn over that, so it's very nice. But this one here is the realistic one. This is pretty much what we're going to see in a lot of Thorgal stories over time. You've got three types of stories: the very realistic ones, the fantasy ones, and the more sci-fi ones. In this book, we've got all three. Outside of being a sci-fi element with a beacon driving the ship back, could have been replaced with pure fantasy elements like magic? Yes. Could it have been replaced by natural causes or natural elements? A bit harder, but a light at the horizon as the sun is rising in a storm is possible when the storm is close to being done or you're close to the limit of it. All three types of stories could have been fit in this one as well. As I said, we see a very nice growth in the art style of Rosinski, the artist, compared to the first volume. It's cleaner, it's more defined, the characters are more realistic, and the storytelling abilities of Van Ham are also improving over time. Rather than being a more or less Conan ripoff, we are going into a new direction with this story. This was a short little video overall, and I will try to finish up that particular book as quickly as possible, maybe in this week or next week. It'll depend on scheduling and work issues. I thank you very much for listening. I hope you guys have a very nice day. Keep reading comics, keep enjoying comics, and we'll keep analyzing them together. Have fun. Bye-bye.